I'm Carmine Gallo with Alexandra Carter. She is a law school professor at Columbia University, the director of the Columbia Law School Mediation Clinic, and author of Ask for More. This is a terrific book on how everyday people can negotiate for anything. Alex, thanks for coming.
Hey, Carmine, it's great to be here. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much for making this time. I always enjoy speaking to authors whose books I enjoy and whose books are going to go on my bookshelf.
Oh, that's amazing. And I have to say, just even from our pre-conversation, I love talking to interviewers who have read and digested. It's really like a sign of respect. So thank you.
I've written several books on communication skills, and you can tell the difference between someone who's just been handed a book and someone who's actually read it and enjoyed it and learned from it.
You sure can. And even in the way you set this interview up, remember you gave me all the bullet points and you're like, here's how it's going to flow. And I thought, that man is a communication expert.
Excellent. Well, coming from a negotiation expert like yourself, that's high praise. So thank you.
You got it.
Let's talk about negotiation. I think for most people, myself included, when we hear the word negotiation, it conjures up a big formal event between two companies or two countries. I know that you're a negotiation trainer for the United Nations, but you were suggesting that it's something that we do in our everyday lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up thinking that too, as a young professional, that it was just a back and forth over money. And then I came to realize that negotiation is steering relationships. It's any conversation in which you are steering a relationship and not just the money conversations.
Steering relationships. Is there some manipulation involved? I know a lot of people might think of negotiation as something, I'm trying to get something out of you, and I'm going to steer you into the direction that benefits me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I see steering relationships as more of an opportunity to treat people in a way that shows them value, but also to teach them how to value you. Once I saw negotiation as steering relationships, I realized that I had an opportunity in every conversation I had with someone to teach them how to value me and how to think about me and my work.
Good point. I like the fact that you look at negotiation through the lens of questions. You say that most people don't ask enough questions in negotiations. Same goes for communication of any type, I'd argue. We like to hear ourselves talk. We don't ask enough questions of the other party, nor do we listen well.
I know. And let me tell you, sometimes, I'm a professional question asker and listener, and sometimes I get home at the end of the day and I gave it the office, you know what I mean? So yes, in fact, there's been research done to show that not just most of us, 93% of us are not asking the questions we need in negotiation to get the best results.
I know your book goes into a number of questions, 10 questions specifically, that you should be asking yourself before negotiation and what you should be asking of the other person. But in general, I think everyone can find value in this one area where you talk about close versus open questions. Can you teach our readers something about that? What do you mean by close versus open, and how does that affect our everyday negotiation?
Absolutely. So a closed question is one where you're going to get a yes, no, or a one-word answer. And a lot of times, our closed questions will start with what I call a non-action verb, like is or should. Should we discuss the quarterly results? Would you like to hear about my product line? And then when I talk to people about open questions, I'm saying that open questions are ones that start with what, how, or something imperative like tell me or describe. And let me concretize for your listeners. Open versus closed is the difference between, do you want to see my product line, closed, versus tell me what your company needs most for the next 6 months. One of those is likely to get a no, and the other is likely to open up a whole conversation that might result in a yes.
That's why you devoted an entire chapter to tell me, the ultimate open question. I love that. What a great way of facilitating a discussion and making a connection with another human being. So rather than ask those closed questions, you're suggesting that we begin questions and begin negotiations and conversations with a form of tell me more.
Yeah, absolutely. And as somebody who studies communication, I know that you use this question, but it's still a secret weapon to much of the world. And it's amazing. I gave a presentation last week to bankers, and a very, very senior banker wrote to me yesterday to say, I thought tell me was for therapists. And now, as a senior banker, I know better,
Hmm.
because she said she asked a client and she asked an employee, you know, tell me what you need from us right now, or tell me how things are going this week. And she reported that she got so much more information than she used to with the more closed questions she was asking.
Wonderful. One chapter in particular resonated with me, and that's what problem do I solve? You suggest that it's a question we should ask ourselves before negotiation. What problem do I want to solve? Well, I'd argue in any great presentation, any great form of communication or public speaking, that's also the key question. I wrote the first book on Steve Jobs and how he gave presentations. He often would ask himself and his team that, what problem are we trying to solve? Because he realized that nobody cares about the product, they care about themselves and their problems. If you can solve my problem, then you'll win me over. And that's how they began. That's how Apple began to design a Steve Jobs presentation. And that's why I really resonated with that chapter on what problem do I solve? How do we as everyday negotiators supposed to use that question?
Yeah, absolutely. And Carmine, in the book, the example is about having created the iPod. It's a huge success, and Jobs nonetheless says this doesn't solve the consumer's problem of too many devices in one bag, right? And so that was the genesis of the iPhone.
Yeah.
But for everyday negotiations, even if you're thinking about going into management and asking for a raise or asking for a promotion, some people will just go in and say, I need 20%. Why? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Is it merely that you need a number of X coming in every 2 weeks? Or are you trying to teach management that you're a leader and you're destined for the C-suite? If it's the latter, maybe the salary isn't enough. You have to do more work to achieve that larger objective.
Okay. What if I simplify it? What problem do I solve in asking for a raise? I solve the problem that I need a new car. I need more money. That's not what that's not the right answer to that question, right?
I would say that's the first answer. It's not the complete answer.
Okay.
If somebody in response to that question, what's the problem I'm trying to solve?
But to be clear, Alex, you're saying I am to ask myself this question to prepare for the negotiation.
Yes. So what's the problem I want to solve is the first question that every negotiator should ask himself before he gets in the room with somebody else. And if he's asking himself this question, what's the problem I want to solve? I'm going in to ask for a raise, and it's because I want the car. Okay, that's a fine starting place. But what I want to ask you is, if you had the car or you have the 401k, what would happen if you achieved that? Because what I want, Carmine, is for people to get the bigger picture perspective on their problem. Usually when we go for the tangible, I want this amount of money in my bank account. I want this kind of car. And I ask people, what would happen if you achieved that? Or I tell them to ask themselves. All of a sudden they say, well, then I'd be able to live the life I wanted to live. Then I'd be able to retire and spend time with my grandkids. That's the bigger picture perspective you want in order to ask for more.
How does that set me up for success in my negotiation, walking into my boss and asking for a raise? How does that set the foundation?
It sets the foundation because if you realize that you're trying to solve a larger problem than just salary, then that shapes what you're going to ask for and how you're going to ask it. Because if your real objective is to tell them, I'm destined for the C-suite, Then you could be thinking about additional things. Who's my mentor? Where am I getting training? You'd be asking questions like, tell me about the last person you mentored to the C-suite and how you got them there. I'd be approaching the entire negotiation differently, and I wouldn't just be focusing on that 20%.
I like that. Very interesting. Finally, Alex, in a post-COVID world, when we reopen and we recover in this, whatever the new normal is going to look like, which we don't know, I
Mhm.
have a feeling there's going to be a lot of everyday negotiation going on. People will be asking for a cut in the fee. Can you lower your fee for that particular product or service? Can you cut me a break on my rent? What should people know about everyday negotiation if there's one thing you could leave us with?
Absolutely. So those negotiations are happening right now. If you are the person seeking the cut or the modification, I want you to make your ask in this format. I, we, here's what I'm requesting, and here's how we benefit. In other words, you study what the other person needs, and then you pitch to that need.
I love it. Thank you. Ask for more, Alexandra Carter. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy that I was able to speak to someone who is a world-class negotiation expert. And the fact that you put all of it in this book is very valuable for everybody. So Alex, thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmine. This has really been a pleasure.